Okay, so this is where we move on to hands and feet. Um, it's not going to be a very long video. This is hands and feet are relatively simple. Hands are definitely the most trickiest in terms of uh, nailing the shape and within ZBrush, just making sure that we're kind of dealing with them the right way, so we're not kind of making too much of a mess and they're nice and controllable. But generally, the shapes are easily achieved. The feet are the simplest one though, and that's where we're going to start off. So we've got our body that we made last session. So if I bring in my little PRF, so look at the feet here. One thing we're not going to worry too much about right now is getting individual toes in there like this. The main thing I want us to worry about is the general shape of the foot, and it's pretty easy. As a basic shape, you can think about it as just a wedge. It's a very, very simple wedge. Uh, or you can think of it as like a cube, which has got an extrusion from the front. So a cube would be in the ankle position, and the extrusion would be forward into the toes. However you want to think about it. But one thing I am going to try and do with it is try and get some toe information in there, get some muscle information in there, tendon information, because there's quite a lot of pads and tendons that are visible in the foot. As you can see in this reference here, you can see that there are tendons there. Now, just going to the hand, there is one thing I want to, just like with the arms and legs and stuff, the hands are very, very similar to the foot. And we have got these long string of bones which make up from essentially our wrist or our ankle to the tips of our toes or fingers. However, the foot, we're not going to look at it, but the foot's actually got two sets of bones. You can look at this up in your own kind of time. It's a little bit too anatomical to worry about with this, but the foot's got two sets of bones, which you can kind of see, and this sculpt is a good indication of it. You can kind of see when you kind of like squash your foot together. You like grab your little toe and your big toe side and you kind of squash them together. You can see the fold in the middle of the foot because you've got a set of bones which come down from the heel to the toe area here, and then a set of bones come from the heel to the big toe area here, and they kind of like roll around, they kind of undulate and move to allow your foot to actually bend and stuff. It's a little bit how your forearm and your tibia and fibula work. Anyway, so we're going to look at that straight away. So it's relatively simple. It's just a wedge that we're going to bring out there as a simple shape. So if I just bring this, I'll leave it there for now. And I'm just going to bring in a new piece of geometry. And let's call that a cube. So I've got my cube in there. And I'm just going to move it down to the foot position. Now, a good way to measure your foot is from the crease of your elbow to just where your hand begins and your wrist, where your tendons are. That's about the length of your foot. So it's a bit of a schlep to do in here, drag something up and measure it to this. But keep that in mind that your foot is essentially from your crook of your elbow to your wrist area. So let's just bring that in. And this is literally, you've got to just take your time with this one and just make sure that you check in that it's the right kind of depth, it's the right width. So I'm just going to move it into place. And like with most things, we're going to be dealing with this as a separate object for now. So you can see, that's a little bit too big. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Okay. So I've got a basic shape there. What I'm going to do is use that cool trim tool we saw. So Control and Shift to change my settings up here on the left. So I can change my select rec or whatever. So click that. I want to go to knife curve. It's going to be the easiest one for this because we want a straight line for this. All I'm going to do is drag it out, holding Control and Shift. Drag it out. Oops, so daisy. And just make sure that the shaded side is facing away. So the shaded side is what's actually going to be cut. And if I let go, well, if I hold Shift while I've got this active, you can see it kind of snaps to 5-degree increments. If you want to get it a little bit looser, you can let go of Shift, but still keep hold of Control, and it's nice and free. You can go to any angle. And if I press Alt, I put like a pin down in the window and allow me to actually make a curve, so I can actually trim a curve off. But for just this, I just want to trim a section off like that. So that's essentially going to be the beginning of my slope of my foot. I'm going to trim a bottom section off like this. And I'm just going to trim not the whole back, I'm going to leave just a little bit. I'm going to trim a little bit off like this from the side. So now we've got the bridge of our foot going down to our toes, the back of the heel going into the heel, and the flat of the foot. Let's have a look how that looks size-wise. Looks fine. And now we can use a trim tool to be a little bit more kind of precise with this bit as well. All I'm going to do is, if you look at our reference on the side here, I'm going to get that curve of the foot. So the inside step, remember that your big toe is obviously on the inside. So on my inside there, I'm just going to have a little bit of a slice. So something like that. So that's just the beginning bit I've done. Obviously, I'm not finished yet because our foot is still a big block. Moving out of the way for now. So my next step, actually bring this back, is to get the other bits of information. So we've got our wedge, we've got everything looking okay. I'm getting the rest of the information in. So I'm going to start getting in the actual shape of the footprint. So remember, the shape of the actual footprint itself is not a rectangle. It's thinner at the back, smaller at the back where the ball of the foot is, where the heel is. And it gets wider near the bridge of the foot, essentially where the knuckles are of the foot, and then kind of slims down a tiny bit where the actual toes are. And I've also got on the inside tread, just behind the pad, behind the big toe, we've got a clearance, this fascia plantar, I believe they call it, something like this. It's basically the inside heel, said this bit here, kind of a bit of a bridge. So I want to get this basic shape in there. So I'm going to leave like that. Go. And I'm just going to use the move tool to move stuff into position. So move the back of my heel in a little bit. And again, I'm not being precious with this. Move the inside of that heel, and pretty much there we go. So it's really important that we pay attention to the tread of the foot, that we really, really pay attention to where the inseam of the foot is, or the inside and the outside of the foot, the heel and all that. So once I've got that, I can literally start going around there with either the trim tool, just to trim off these two corner bits, to make a bit of a heel. You know, I can approach this however I want. I can make a big old mess, or I can be quite methodical, so I can use my trim to really, oops. Okay, and we're back. So all I was doing then before my ZBrush decided to crash was I was just using the trim tool, positioning the camera and using the trim tool just to take a little bit of shape off the sides. Now again, I'm not being super careful with this so much. I'm just more about getting a shape in it, just like what we've been doing throughout this year. So remembering to get in that little shape. Though I am paying attention to my reference. I'm always looking at my reference, and there isn't one. They normally do like a cross-section diagram for this, but in the Anatomy for Artists, you see a good few references. But try and imagine what the cross-section of the foot is like going up to the ankle. You know, it's not necessarily a perfect wedge like we've got in this diagram here. The more we refine it, we'll know that the inside, or where the big toe is going to be higher, and then we're going to fall away to the outside of the foot. So I am going to keep that in mind as I'm going around and fixing stuff up. So always checking as well that the foot actually makes sense. And now that we've got a foot actually here, it might inform us that we need to make changes of our sculpt and stuff. So, you know, be prepared to make some adjustments before we amend it. So I'm just going to work through and carefully go through, make some adjustments, leaving the other foot away for now, not duplicating it over, so that I'm able to actually get inside and work on it. What I'm going to do is get that shape in there, rough it in a little bit, go in there with a weaker smooth tool and just kind of like knock some of it back. I don't want to use a smooth tool to the point where it's going to be obliterating the shape, but getting in that wedge shape you can see there. A good reference for this particular shape is the George Bridgman kind of method. So I'm still thinking of a block, but I'm thinking of a block where obviously I'm getting this kind of cross section. Notice as well, I'm not doing any dynameshing so far. I could absolutely do some dynameshing if I wanted to, but at the minute I'm just feeling the shape out. So getting that little inseam there. And of course, because I've done some trimming, the topology isn't great to do the sculpting with, but just to do some little bits of knocking around, perfectly good. Now I'm always going to be moving around as well, so that the transition, at least for now, the transition from the heel into the leg makes sense. Now there is something as well that we've not looked at within the leg, which is connected to the foot, and that's the Achilles tendon, which is at the very back of the foot, which is in between both the ankles. At the back, you've got the Achilles tendon. We've not really spoken about that at all, because it's best to leave that until the foot is attached. But this is also something I'm going to be thinking about, is the back of my foot here isn't just one big round ball. The base, the actual heel itself is a nice round ball, but above it, that's where we start to kind of choke in to this Achilles tendon. So I can even start to pull some of that information in. And I'm doing this with the mouth as well, but I can absolutely do this with anything. So I've just picked up my pen there, and I can just go in and, however you want to do this. There you go. So we've probably gone as far as I can take this with its current state. So I'm just going to dynamesh this, move this out of the way. So I've still got that reference where I can see it on my second monitor. But now I'm going to dynamesh this at a low resolution. What we got? 128. Maybe a bit more than that. Let's go for 250. Yeah, that's looking good. Okay, nice and low res, 250. Again, all I'm going to do is just start using those tools, using that new geometry to get my foot looking as nice as possible, and also start working on my leg now that I've got an actual foot in there to reference it to. I can start to adjust my leg. So come in here, start thinking about those ankles. Very, very strong. Think about those ankles. So my interior ankle is a little bit higher. So we have got that downward slope. And again, I'm looking at my reference. I'm looking for all the cavities and then the bone protrusions. Again, think about those pinpoints. Achilles tendon back there. It's not really worrying too much about making a mess. Smooth some bits off. So I really want to get away from any square edges that might still be left behind as well. So elements like the foot and like the hand, because they are simpler, smaller, less information is included within these kind of shapes, it's easy to create on a technical level, like to make the shape and stuff. But the thing which is quite difficult with feet and hands is actually getting the shape looking like it fits to the body, and making it actually look like it, belongs where it does. So looking from this angle, I'm looking at the heel kind of sticking out a little bit too much there. I'm looking underneath, I'm seeing that I've got a little point. I want to keep that as round as I can. Bring this in a little bit, making sure that it's, that it's actually getting, I can do some going there and do some trimming again. It's actually getting quite thin near the bottom where my toes are. I need to pay attention to that. So I can do mirror and weld now. Boom. Yeah, that looks. They look okay, but they look a little bit thin, look a bit small. So that's some perspective. Yeah, they look a little bit dainty and small. So just a small bit of adjustment. Just off again. Push them forward a little bit. And I'm gonna push the inside tread shape. If you think about the inside of the foot, comes in a little bit. I'll push that a little bit further. Oh, make sure I've got symmetry turned on. There you go. That's better. Oh, make sure I've not got any weird lumps and bumps. Make sure everything looks fits. Again, looking at reference, it's quite surprising how thin the foot is. So I'm making sure that I'm not getting any like boots. Make sure I've actually got a foot. So I might have to thin this whole thing down a little bit more. A little bit there. Okay. I feel like I could probably thin out my ankles and my body a little bit. Yeah, feels a little bit nicer like that. Feels a bit more balanced. Yeah. Maybe step away from your model to look at it, see how the silhouette looks. Or even, back away and then look at your top left here. Does that make sense? Do you see anything wrong with this? I don't see anything wrong with it, so I'm happy. Okay. At this point, I'm ready to Dynamesh these into the body. So what resolution am I at with the body? 800. Okay. So let's merge these down. Dynamesh these. There we go. So now with our new resolution, I can start to blend this in together properly, getting away from any of the weird lumps, getting nice transitions. Still hovering around, seeing if I can see any of those strange lumps from like back here, for instance. I've got a little lump under my ankle that I can get rid of. Just working this through. So I'm really paying attention to these angles as well. So you can see on the left leg here, I've got this little kind of bump. I want to make sure that that is nice and smooth. And make sure that foot doesn't look too funky. It's just a lot of back and forth, pushing and pulling, like everything. But if you imagine the heel is the point where all the weight goes on your body, that's where everything kind of supplants to. You don't want to have your backy heel too far backwards. I think it was what was my problem on mine a second ago, was it was a little bit too far back. Give me a bit of a weird shape. Now, obviously, if you're going to be putting boots on your character, or if the actual anatomy of the foot isn't going to be a massive issue, well, all you need is like a very good base shape, which is what we're all worried about. We're not worried about putting toes on this so much. The reason is why we're not going to worry about putting toes on these yet, until we do kind of like more master studies kind of stuff, is because you need to be working either at a very, very high resolution so that the Dynameshes don't merge, but with toes, they are connecting, touching all the time. They're connected quite a lot. Let's bring the reference down so see what I'm looking at. But one thing to think of, well, sorry. But another way of doing it is using a technique which we haven't actually covered yet. Retopologizing, where you'd actually make your foot and you'd retopologize it within either Maya or ZBrush, and then stop working in any sort of Dynamesh kind of way. So you'd model your foot to a certain point, then you'd retopologize it into the main body. But at that point, you'd never go back to Dynameshing, because Dynameshing will just turn it back into a bit of a mess. So just take a little bit of time just going around and fixing up the foot a little bit. Making sure that the outside of the foot isn't too convex. Just getting away from any of those lumps. So you can see there I've got a bit of a lump going on. It's around here. I still want that Achilles tendon right at the back. And then I want the cavities either side. Let's go in and now, if I was going to take this more in the anatomical, realistic direction, there's a couple of other things I'm going to do. I'm doing one right now where I'm just making that cavity underneath the foot so that we have got that roundness on the bottom of the foot there, and I can actually start to think about taking away some of the information on the inside there to stop it looking a little bit too like a sock. And I'm gradually just taking away that. So just bringing in this inside, kind of emphasizing that kind of foot shape. If I draw it in there. So I've got the pad at the front, then it bends around to the outside, then you got your heel. Kind of emphasizing that shape a little bit. I'm softening out the outsides here so it's less square. Because if we look at it from the front in a minute, this is quite a steep transition. So I'm going to get rid of that. Also just looking around again, seeing any of those nasty little sock kind of edges. Okay. That's looking better. Now feet are a quite a difficult thing for me personally to do. Feet have always kind of eluded me with being easy. Bodies and heads I can knock out really, really fast. Hands and feet always seem to kind of like stump me a little bit. So I always have to take my time working on them. And that's what I want you to do. Take your time, work on them. You know, it sounds gross, but, you know, pay attention to your own feet. You know, find the lumps. There are still fatty deposits in the foot. There are still glands and muscle fibers and all that sort of stuff we can kind of think about within the foot. We are our own best reference after all. Okay. So the only other thing, as I was going to say before, the only other thing I'd probably be thinking about is the fact that in the foot, this is a good example here, if I bring it a bit back here. In the foot, we have almost got like a base tread to the foot. It begins at the back of the heel there. You can see that the heel sits on a pad, a cushion, just like an elephant. You have this fat pad to cushion your heel. But going around the base of the foot there, you've almost got like a bit of a donut, like it's a good example there, actually, a donut shape that goes around the bottom. And on some people, you can actually see a clear kind of transition from the top of the foot going around, and then you have this kind of like a little bit of a pinch and an indent. It's kind of on the hand as well when we come to look at that. But I kind of want to get this as well. So I want to have this nice little round padded section here, along with this little pinch across the side, this transition from the top of the foot into this little pad. So, let's do a quick save because I'm paranoid about it crashing. Yep. So what I'm going to do is use the DAM standard. And I'm just going to get rid of that. That gonna stick on screen for a bit. That's going to stick on screen for a bit. So, DAM standard. And just trace out that little donut shape for myself. And again, it's like just a guide. It won't be there as clear as this later on, but what I can do is start to bring out that bit of information now. So like everything, we bring it out, we knock it back, we bring it out, we knock it back, we sculpt it in, and we smooth it back. And obviously, depending on the resolution that you're at, some of this will actually not be relevant because the resolution isn't there for us to actually put any of that information in there. But I just want to get that shape in there while I'm here. So get that old fat deposit. What I'm also going to be doing is just making sure that I'm keeping the foot relatively flat. What I don't want to be doing is building up on the heel, for instance, and then getting like a ball. That's one thing I want to avoid. I want to make sure I'm keeping relatively flat, so I'm constantly moving around. Just making sure that what I'm doing is giving me the right shape. Cool. And then just to make sure I understand what I'm looking at, I'm going to identify a big toe, round to underneath, like that. Change some materials, give our eyes a bit of change. Go. So I'm still looking around for those odd little shapes that might have appeared as I've been sculpting. See a little bit of a lump there. Now, one thing about sculpting, which when you come to do character work, you've got to be aware of, is it's actually unnatural for us to stand with our feet facing completely forward, because technically our knees, for most of us, our knees would actually start to turn to the inside. And it often makes our sculpts look a little bit kind of stiff and a bit unnatural. But if you were to tilt your legs slightly, rotate your feet slightly outwards, it would help you stand a little bit better. I'm not going to worry about doing that just now, because we're still very much working on it. But when you come to pose and stand and work on things in a little bit more of a asymmetrical, realistic way, just be aware that, yeah, your feet do kind of stand at a slight angle facing out from you to support you. Okay, so I'm going to leave the feet like that for now, because that's enough information. If I stand back, that looks like feet. If I bring this up, they look like feet. But obviously we're missing all the really, really minor detail like toes and stuff. But like I said, you're probably going to be putting boots and shoes on these, so what's the point? Okay, so that's feet. Like I said, starting off with a wedge, and then however you want to do it, I went in there and started slicing some stuff off using the trim tool or the knife tool. However you want to do it, just start making that foot and start thinking about the cross sections of the foot. Think about a wedge, but think about, if you were to take a cross section of this, what does the interior cross section look like compared to the exterior? Your big toe actually is quite a large surface area of the leg. They get smaller to the outside. Look at reference of feet in stretched and feet in normal position like this. And again, try and see the shapes. Try and see the position of the ankles. The ankles is a very interesting one to think about. So the interior ankle is going to be a little bit higher than your exterior. And we're moving quite fast through this as well, so I'm not spending too much time on much of this, even though it pains me, and I really want to spend a lot more time on it. We're just moving a little bit fast through this, just so the videos aren't really, really long. But I would spend a bit more time in this, making sure that my ankles are the correct shape, because that really does do my head in when I see bad ankles. Okay. Now it's hands. So moving on to hands now. Actually, see how long this video is. I'm going to stop the video and do another one for the hands because we're getting to half an hour for this. So feet, wedges, take your time to get the shapes right. Think about what the actual footprint looks like. So you got the interior kind of cavity there, the shape of the foot as it kind of bends to the outside and kind of has a concave shape to the inside, the curvature of the toes, the roundness of that ball of the foot. Think about those fatty pads at the back, which kind of give you a little bit more of a bulge. So instead of having just a flat line like this, you've got a little bit of a bulge at the back where that fat pad is. You've got your Achilles tendon, which is at the very, very back, which is a really, really nice shape to have, especially when you're doing something a bit more athletic. Very, very nice shape. Then you got your ankles. So fairly easy, but just really, really pay attention to your references.